worst case scenario. There is no time in which this is ever acceptable. Now, before you get on my back and you say, Mr. DeBoer, what if I'm playing the piano and I have octaves in my left hand and they're running? Of course it's all parallel eighths. But that isn't Renaissance counterpoint either. And the other thing that you need to understand is I put this in the prologue. Of course you've read that in your free time. Music theory is in fact just that, a theory. This is the set of rules. There are always exceptions to the rules. But when you're learning, it's really important that we follow rules. Okay, so that's parallel eighths. A hidden eighth is when we have similar motion into a note. So in this case, I don't have parallel because I have a sixth here instead of the eighth, but both voices are moving in the same direction. This one's particularly bad. Let's change this up a little bit and make this D, so that's a fifth to an eighth. This is a step and this is a leap. But it's still both voices moving up and then forming the perfect consonants. Is that the question you're going to ask?
Yeah, so like same direction just means that they both move up or down?
Yes.
Okay.
It doesn't matter that one's leaping and one's stepping. They're both moving up, and that's bad. All right. Lastly, we have, let's say this one. This is a really strange circumstance that this would occur. This is an octave and a third. And they're moving in contrary motion to each other, but both voices are leaping into that fifth. This is what's referred to as a beaten fifth. Both voices are leaping into it. You really want one of the voices, at least, to step into the perfect interval. This has to do with frequency problems. They didn't probably realize this in the 16th century, but with the 3-to-2 tuning ratio, or the 2-to-1 ratio, really locking that in with both voices leaping is difficult. If one voice steps, it sort of makes that note much more predictable, and you're not counting on someone else as well to just time that perfectly and lock that in. So one voice gives a little more stability. Of the three, if we were to make a hierarchy, parallel is the worst. Hidden is pretty bad. Beaten is not a good idea. Do you understand where we're going with that? If you had the choice of the three, beaten's probably the best scenario. They're all bad. So that's the general rules, the first couple bullet points. The next one, you can use parallel motions with threes or sixes, which are imperfect consonances, but never three in a row. So if you go parallel motion from 3 to 3, the next one should not be another parallel 3 to 3. I understand Rihanna does this all the time. It's okay. She's not writing in 16th century counterpoint. It'd be pretty cool if she was. Yes?
So you can do parallel things, just not twice in a row?
You can do one parallel thing. Don't do it again.
Just like one interval and the next one can't be?
Right, so if you went like 3, 3, 6, you're fine. Okay? It's when you move that 3, 3, 3 or 6, 6, 6. So,
That's a bad number.
yes, this is pretty much the devil or the devil's son in your counterpoint. So you should see it pretty easily. Because when you write your examples, you write in between the two staves, you'll write in the number interval. And very quickly, you see, that's one thing you can check so easily. Like there's no reason you'll turn that into me and not have seen that. Because you'll see, that's one of the things you check. Is there 3 3s or 3 6s in a row? No? Okay, done. All right, the last thing, the voices can never cross. Now, with this being alto clef, you have to be careful on that. You have to know the middle line is middle C, and you have to check that. Don't go into unison, and your counterpoint line can't cross one way or the other. I believe you have examples both where you have to write the counterpoint above and below. Okay. Now, dissonance, not usable. You got a 2, 4, or 7, you're immediately wrong. Easy to check. At the beginning of the line, when writing a part above the cantus firmus, the first interval must be a 5, 8, or 12. Use the 8. Write that in your notes, circle it in your book, whatever. Use the 8. The 5 or the 12 is something of an emergency situation. For whatever reason, it didn't work with the 8. If you can, always use the 8. When writing a part below the cantus firmus, the first interval must be a unison or an octave. Don't use the 5th. The reason why is a distinguished listener of counterpoint should be able to tell which line's the cantus firmus, which line is the counterpoint. And when you use the 5th, you indicate the top is immediately the counterpoint. But if you're writing lower level counterpoint, you can't do that. All right, each line has to have a climax of line. They can't happen at the same time. So if you're given a cantus firmus, it is important that you find the climax of the line. It will be the highest point in pitch. Your line has to climax at a different line, at a different time. Before you draw out your counterpoint, you should plan where that's going to be. Usually you'll want to go, the climax of the cantus firmus is going to be right towards the middle. It's easier to climax earlier. You can do later. But if you do later, it can set up some cadence problems. The cadence refers to the last 3 notes, usually the last 2. The last note is the resting point, and you'll hear this term a lot, and this is from books, penultimate. Penultimate means second to last. So you'll look at that direction, the second to last note into the last note, and how that goes. It'll always go like this. The relationship in the cantus firmus, almost 100% of the time, is going to be 2 to 1. Second scale degree leading back down to the lowest scale degree. Your counterpoint should be 7 to 1. So we'll get a 6th in the penultimate measure that'll move to an 8th with both voices stepping out. Got it? Now, the problem with this leads back to our major minor, harmonic minor, melodic minor discussion from earlier in the year. You need a leading tone in certain modes. In Dorian, Aeolian, and Mixolydian, in the penultimate measure, you will raise by half step the leading tone. You don't do it in Phrygian because it's already done. You don't do it in Aeolian because it will create an augmented second. Yes, no, maybe. I'm sorry, you don't do it in Phrygian or Aeolian because it'll create an augmented second. You don't do it in Ionian because it's already done. And we just don't use Locrian. Just don't do it. I'll tell you why in a minute. Okay. And in Lydian, yes, it's already done.